Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic show. It's episode 611. I know I regularly say this, but I have been really looking forward to this interview. We got Victoria Fleming with us. Victoria is the founder of Buzztastic, Tacit or whatever. I got yes, Victoria, I got a slip there. To say she's a software sales expert would be understatement. She's got over 20 years experience of working with some of the largest tech companies in the world. Plus, she's been actively consulting with medium and small companies. I thought she was the right lady to give her wisdom and insight when it comes to sales. So we'll be delving into all the processes, all the problems that you might have around getting sales. I've also got my great co-host, Stephen, with me. Stephen, would you like to quickly introduce yourself to the new listeners and viewers?
Yeah, Stephen Souter from zipfish.io. We make WordPress fast by optimizing the code that runs WordPress and the code that runs the servers.
That's great. And before we go into this great interview with Victoria, I just want to talk about our major sponsor, and that's Costas. If you're looking to get into podcasting, you need somewhere to host your audio files, plus produce the RSS feed and a host of other things. I was using another platform for about 5 years. About 6 to 7 months ago, I moved over to Costas. Matt Medeiros of the Matt Report podcast had just became their marketing and sales director. You know, he's a great friend of the show, and I decided if Matt was going to head it, I should look at their product, and I decided to jump ship, and I have been delighted to join them. It's a great interface, really simple to use. They're about half the price of the previous platform I was using, and they've just been tremendously supportive in the process of moving over 700 podcasts to their platform. Yes, I do 2 podcasts. I suggest you go over there, have a look what they've got to offer. All the links are in the show notes. If you're looking to get into podcasting for yourself or for clients, have a look at what they offer. I would use them. If you do, please tell them that you heard about them on this podcast. It really supports the show. So, Victoria, let's go straight into it. You said before we went live that everything seems to have woken up. Everybody is jumping with joy that the pandemic seems to be in the back mirror to some extent, and they're looking for sales. What's your insights about, you know, what you should know, and some maybe a key way people look at sales that's incorrect? Is that a good start, Victoria?
Yeah, of course it is. It's talking about sales, so that's always a good start, isn't it? You know what? It is. It's a really interesting time. I'm across in the UK, and we're in the middle of opening back up, which is fantastic because we are so excited to see people. So I'm sure across in the US, I know you've had different approaches in different areas, but I think we can all just appreciate how nice it is to get back out and about, both personally and business. So. And actually, I think that's one of the big misconceptions about sales. So look, there was my little link there. Because I think one of the big misconceptions about sales is that, you know, it's this quite antisocial role almost. You know, nobody likes salespeople.
Oh, you seem very antisocial, Victoria.
Exactly, but this is the whole point. That's a misconception. Actually, most of the best salespeople I know are just really relationship people, and they love having conversations, they love building relationships, they love talking to people. So I think that I'm really excited about being able to go out and do that face-to-face a bit more again, and work, you know, face-to-face with some of the teams that I work. But I think that the big misconception that salespeople are bad, evil, horrible people has been the biggest limiter on people's success, because I think especially for smaller businesses, people think, well, I don't want to sell because that's horrible. That's going to make me a bad person. Like, if I do that, I'm going to be that horrible person that's in my head that I've seen on the TV, you know, some in the films and stuff like that. I'm going to be that like rotten person. And that really holds back people's businesses, when really being able to sell is just about having great conversations with a purpose. And it's just that, having a great conversation, having a great, like, you know, relationship with the purpose of sharing more about your business and maybe opening up an opportunity and then asking for it. So yeah, I think that to join up the pandemic and the biggest problem, that one.
Yeah, I totally agree with you with my own business. We use inbound marketing to generate interest in our product and service. So we use inbound articles and SEO in a traditional online software for a service model. But my main objective when they come to the WP-Tonic website is for them to book a Zoom with us. And I normally take all those Zooms. Fundamentally, it's a sales call, but what I try and produce during the call, even if they don't purchase straight away a WP-Tonic service, is they get some value from the call. Yes. I think that's the right attitude. What do you think, Victoria?
Oh, like 100%. And in fact, if you want to speak with me, you don't book a sales call, you don't book a discovery call, you book a eureka conversation. And that's because I always say, look, you spend a bit of time with me and you are going to have at least one eureka moment on that call. But of course, I'm always hoping for 2 eureka moments, because I want a eureka moment where people get a quick win. And I want the eureka moment where they realize that they need to work with me. So, but I always call this eureka conversations, because literally I want people going off the call just going, that was like awesome. Like, as you say, I've got a bit of value, I've got something actionable, and actually, you know what, I could totally work with that person, we could do something great together. So I agree with it so much, I even renamed my discovery calls there, Jonathan.
Yeah. Over to you, Stephen.
That's awesome. I love that name. You were saying just a little bit ago about how sales is about relationships and stuff. I also hear, like, from a different side, saying that sales is all about process and automate everything and, you know, get people in this funnel and then work them down the funnel. And to me, that feels like it's at odds with this relationship, because, like, you can't automate, or at least I haven't figured out how do you automate a relationship, because a true relationship has so many variables. Like, you can't adjust fast enough. You have, every person's a unique and individual, kind of they have their own problems, their own use cases, their own things that you have to speak into. How do you balance that? Do you think you should balance it? Are people too far in the automation world? Are they not far enough? What's your perspective on that?
Look, this is like a huge challenge as well, because I think on one side, you've got like fairly low ticket items. Like, you can't afford to invest loads of time in those types of sales. So, you know, you really want like a really structured funnel, you know, that's going to automate and do all this, that, and the other. On the other hand, you've got like really high ticket items where it does need to be like a one-to-one conversation or a one-to-many conversation for you to progress that. I think that what's really interesting in this day and age, though, is because there's more room in the middle. And what I mean by that is, I think that even with that really automated approach, which I've got to be honest, I think some people hide behind. Some people automate things that don't need to be and shouldn't be automated, because they don't want to have a conversation because they're scared. So I think, you know, if that's the reason you've got like a really automated funnel, then you're probably losing business because of it. But I think it's about being smart. So even right at the other end of the scale, where, you know, you do have to automate, all the way through that, I think what's getting to be really important for people is personalization. I also think that just because you can't have loads of ongoing conversations with people and lots of face-to-face doesn't mean that you can't have instigate some sort of a conversation. I know someone actually who sells really low ticket, like, sort of software stuff, but what they do is every day they hop on into the chatbots and everything, and actually they take over from the chatbots, and they literally just take over on the site and go, hey, I've just taken over, you know, from the chatbot, like, it's actually me, I just want to say hello, how are you finding the site? So that hour a day investment, normally they do a good couple of dozen. But the two interesting things about that are, one is that those people that are talked to, like one-to-one, the conversion rate on those people goes right up because, of course, they're tracked. The second thing about it is, though, the actual overall lifetime value of those customers is coming out as much higher. And it's because those buyers not only bought in, they feel a more personal connection to the business and the product. So I think this is where I'm all about, like, thinking about how can you be innovative? How can you do something different? And yeah, you can't go and talk to every single person who's going to spend £10, a month on a product. I get that. But like, what could you do? What could you do to impact? Because the other thing that's interesting is people talk. So, even if someone doesn't buy, they talk about, OMG, I had the MD talking to me. Did you know? Blah, 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 blah. They've just done this or they've just done that. Because he purposely keeps it super personal, purposely, to show that it really isn't a bot. I think it's an interesting one. I think it's about being imaginative in that middle ground,
Yeah, kind of like mixing that automation with maybe moments of personal interaction, because then if that automation gets kicked off later on down the road, right, to that person, sure, maybe they know it's an automation that's going on, but they still have that personal connection or affinity for that company from the previous, couple times ago or whatever, that they had that personal interaction.
Yeah, so I do. So I definitely think there's a place where it's just trying to work out how to make it happen,
Yeah.
And I say being clever, because the other thing is as well, I think that you as an owner, or someone who owns a business, someone who is scaling a business, whatever you're doing, the biggest challenge is that you get so absorbed in other stuff, and the sales automation works to whatever level, that you start to get really removed from actually your frontline customers and prospects. And that in itself can actually be really dangerous. So having that small amount of time every day to interact with people who are maybe on the website or who are in your funnel or whatever it might be, that can be really invaluable to your business as well as to your actual sales process and sales cycle.
If I was like just for the sake of argument, if I was like a person that hated sales and like I just want to hide behind my keyboard all day and just work on my product, like I love my product, I build an awesome SaaS product, no one's buying it because I'm not doing any sales, can you hire a salesperson? Like, does that work? Or does the person who, like, if you're a founder, you're just starting off, does that founder have to figure out how to get out of their shell to do the sales?
Okay, this is such a great question. So I deal quite a lot with founders who are in exactly that situation. I was recently doing some work with Startup Boost, which is now Founder Boost, around exactly this, and it was all with the founders involved there. So I think the first thing is, does a founder have to sell? And you know what? And this is going to sound terrible, but I think if nothing else, you should try. And the reason for that is because actually nobody cares about your product more than you. Nobody in the world. And actually that passion and enthusiasm for your product will really help to carry you there, even if you feel a bit uncomfortable about it. And the reason you should try to sell it is because if you have never sold this product before, then you don't know how to do it. And if you don't know how to do it and you try and outsource that, or you try and employ someone, then the one thing that every salesperson out there can do is they can sell themselves. So you are going to be paying a big fat salary to somebody for however long you put up with them to potentially not be able to work out how to sell the bloody product, at which point in time you invested all that money, you still don't know how to sell the product, you've invested in them now not knowing how to sell the product either, and you've still got no money coming in. So I understand people are like desperate to like outsource this, but I really push people like give it a go. You're the best person to talk about this product. I mean, after all, if you were going to go and pitch to a group of investors, you would of course do it. Well, that's sales. It's absolutely sales. So it's just a little bit of a different angle. And I also think, again, as the founder, as the leader, as you've got this beautiful thing that you've put together, taking that out into the world and getting people to say, that's great, I love it, but, because there's always the B word. Yeah, there's always the B word. I love it, but I would definitely buy it, but that's really important, valuable feedback for you as well. So, Stephen, if you're hiding behind your keyboard, like I would really encourage you to give it a go.
Yeah, he is. We need to go for our break, Victoria. It's been a fantastic first half. We're looking for the second half. We'll be back in a few moments. We're coming back. We've got Victoria Fleming with us. To say that she's a sales expert is a slight understatement. We've had a great discussion in the first half. Let's hope, I'm sure the second half is just going to be a blast as well. So, Victoria, I know 2 words that will induce a cold sweat into a business owner, and that's called cold calling. If there's anything that can induce panic and fear in a business owner, I don't do cold calling, but I do what I call warm calling.
Yes.
You probably know what I'm talking about. What does the difference mean to you? And maybe you can explain the difference between cold calling and warm calling.
Okay, so certainly I can talk to you a bit about, because I actually have been involved with businesses who do both. I definitely warm call for my business. I don't cold call, but there's a reason for that. So cold call, actually, I'll tell you, I will describe a cold call experience, because my first ever sales job, I was young and impressionable. I was keen to impress. And I turned up for my very first sales job, and it was ringing people on an evening to sell double glazing. Literally, that was what it was. That was my first sales job. So what that meant was we went to this room. There's always people. You'd sit down at a desk, and it was back when you had the phone like actually on the cord. I am that old. Okay, so we had the phone on the cord, and they ripped out the page of like the literal like local directory with all the phone numbers in. And they gave us a script, and it was horrendous. So you'd ring up and say, "Oh, hello, can I speak to? And are you the homeowner?" And I mean, we've all had these calls, haven't we? Complete cold calling. That really is the definition of cold calling. It meant that we didn't know who they were. We knew nothing about them. We were randomly ringing people and just going, fingers crossed, if we ring enough people, somebody might actually say, "I'm vaguely interested in your product or service." I hated it. I managed 4 nights and then I didn't go back. I didn't even go back to pick up my wages or anything. I was just like, I'm just so done with that. It made me feel dirty. It was terrible. But this is the impression that people have sometimes of sales, I think. So that really to me is cold calling. In the moment, you do still see some of it quite often on auto dialers. You get that little blank silence before the phone suddenly kicks in, and you're on an auto dialer. And that is literally exactly the same thing. It's exactly the same thing, only automated. I'm sure there's some businesses that are still making that work. To me, you've got a very low hit rate. I think people are highly irritated by a lot of these now. So you're not necessarily building that relationship like I mentioned earlier.
Sorry to interrupt, Victoria, but I think I'm not unusual. When I have a client or anybody that I'm going to take a voice message from, I put them in my smartphone. And any call that comes to me that's not from a direct business number that I only use on the website, if it doesn't come from that, either using my personal mobile number and it's not on my list, it doesn't get answered. If they can't be bothered to leave a voice message, it doesn't get an answer. And then every day I block all the people that are, so I'm not even sure cold calling even works now in any shape or form, because I'm sure most people do what I do.
And so I don't know what you do, Jonathan. So what do you do? Tell me what you do, then I'll tell you if I do the same.
Well, if it's anybody that's important, they go on my contact list on my iPhone. So they're identified straight away when they call me. If they're not on the list, and I'm not going to pick up and if they can't be bothered to leave a voice message, I just presume they're a cold caller, and then they get blocked. That's how it works, and I'm sure I'm no different with anybody else.
So I'm not going to make those kind of calls for my business. I don't think they're going to do my reputation much good. And I also think that, I say people are very tired of them. So I'm like you, I follow a warm call strategy. And that means that by the time I ring and somebody picks up the phone and I say my name, they know who I am. And there's various different ways that I do that. I'm quite active on LinkedIn. And what I do is I do some LinkedIn flirting. So I flirt on LinkedIn. So
you don't. You would dare do that, would you, Victoria? Flirt on LinkedIn.
I go on their profile so they can see I've gone on their profile. And then 2 days later, I check to see if they've come on my profile, because I've winked at them. If they come on my profile, they've winked back, all right? Then I go through and I send a nice little connection request, a little message. So that's like on the Wednesday. And then between then and the beginning of the next week, I'll generally try to post a comment or start some sort of conversation just around the stuff that they're interested in, so that when I ring them on the Monday and go, oh, it's Victoria, we're talking on LinkedIn. And they go, oh, yeah. Brilliant. Okay, so now we're starting a conversation. The trick of that, of course, is you have to do it relatively quickly because everyone's busy. So it's that whole thing that you need to do it quickly enough that you're top of mind. So that's one of the ways that I do it. And I also do a lot of stuff after face-to-face networking events as well, which is obviously a great way to actually build your contact list. But of course, the key thing is once you're going to pick the phone up, they're going to take the call because they recognize your name. But what you say next is going to be really important, because they recognize your name, but they're going to give you 30 seconds. Why are you ringing me? What's this about? So in that first 30 seconds, I think the really important thing is to plan your call. And this is what people quite often don't do. Because to me, the very first sentence really needs to be, once you sort of said who you are, it's got to be a great reason why they should invest the next couple of minutes in talking to you. And it should have something in it for them, some point of value. So this goes back to what you were saying, Jonathan, really before, where's the point of value, Right,
over to you, Stephen.
When you're starting to look at your sales process, right? Like, I need more sales. Where should I start? Kind of I think that's something people are like, oh, I need more sales. What do I do now? Start cold calling, start emailing, start Google ads spending? Is it everything? There's just so many different ways to sell today. And there's so many people out there trying to get you to use their service or their system to help you sell, right? Like, buy a list from me, or run an ad over here, or come be a part of my networking group, or whatever. How do you even get going? How do you get out behind your keyboard and start that process?
Do you mean what should you do next, Stephen? Is that actually the question?
Yeah. The actual question is all right. So you convinced me that I need to get out from my keyboard and I need to start selling. But what do I do?
Okay, so the first thing that you need to do is you need to look at what you've already got. Okay, and I think that's really important, because you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. What have you got already? So are you already running marketing campaigns? Are they delivering leads? And is the problem then what happens next? Or is the problem that you're running a marketing campaign and not getting any leads? So the first thing is look at what you've already got, because there's literally no point in reinventing the wheel if you've already got something that's actually delivering inquiries to you. Because actually it sounds like then if you're getting the inquiry, it's just what happens next. So I think the first thing is look at what you've got and go through it and almost rate every one of those things on a scale of 1 to 10, just because that's a really sensible way to just think, well, this is giving me a return, this really isn't. What's the problem with turning that now into a sale? So I think that's the first thing. Don't start from scratch if you don't need to. The second thing is to think, okay, so what is the point at which I'm going to actually get that customer across the line? When are they going to do that? Are they going to do that on the website? Are they going to do it on a call? Are they going to do it in a face-to-face meeting? What is the sale point? And again, that's really helpful, because If, for example, you need a face-to-face meeting in order to sell the level of money that you're asking for, the value that you're asking for, then actually you need to start there and work backwards. Because then you need to think, okay, well, how do I get someone to the meeting? How would I do that? Well, I need to ask them. Okay, so how would I get the opportunity to ask them? Well, I would need to be connected to them. I'd need to be having a conversation. So you can almost start to work backwards. If it's a case where that purchase is going to be a click on a website, a clicky button, then again, it's the same thing, work backwards. How are people actually going to get to that point? And actually between those 2 points, that's quite often where you find you've got the problem. So you think, this is how they're going to buy, and this is where they're going to buy, and this is what's working on my marketing bit. Oh yeah, I haven't really sorted out that bit in the middle. I don't know if this is ringing any bells with you, Stephen, is it?
Yeah, of course. Like it's that part in the middle, right? It's one thing to make a connection with the customer. It's how do you get that connection into a sale, right? How do you get that click into a sale? And that's like what you're saying, where all that nuance is, probably depending on like what your product is and stuff. But that's really where the rubber hits the road, and where like things actually matter and make a difference, and how you handle that and how you transition that, which I guess like is kind of similar to what people are talking about with funnels. But in this context, we're talking more about relationship. Like, where you as a person, as that person, I mean, funnels probably play a role in that as well, but there's also this relationship aspect.
And I think especially for founders. So quite often what I tell founder sellers to do, because they're worried about it and they're not really sure what's going to happen, and they're feeling a bit nervous about getting out from behind the keyboard, and they don't know who to speak to, and they don't know how to speak to them, and they've never sold the product, so what's going to work, what isn't. One of my top tips that I sort of say, look, this is what we're going to do. And so what we do is, the people on our list and all this, that and the other, we come up with something which is a bit of a hand raiser that says, yes, I've got this problem. So that might be a click through, or it might be a download, or it might be whatever. But then as part of that, what that's basically said is, yes, I have this problem, which is always really helpful. It's a marketing thing, But then the next thing that we then do is we follow up with a personal email from the founder. And that email actually says, look, I really appreciate you downloaded our thing. I was really interested in your feedback around what you thought around it. I'm actually picking up with a few of our prospects, or a few of our clients, or a few people around what they thought of it, because obviously I'm only getting an internal view. So I would love your help. Have you got 5 minutes just to give me your feedback around what you thought of that? Now, what's lovely about that is there's a few things you've done there. Asking for help is wonderful. Because we're human beings, we want to help each other, we want to help people. 99.9% of the world wants to help. So as soon as you say, can you help me? That's really nice. The second thing is because you've really sort of stated, I'm like the CEO, I'm like the director, I'm a senior person. People see that as like not such a sales thing. It's more like a genuine thing where you want an insight into your business. So people will also be a bit flattered about that. You want their insight, you want their thoughts about it. Yeah. So at that point in time, people will hop on a call with you. And that's great, because you can literally start with, so what did you think of it? Did it make sense? Oh, that's really interesting. So what exactly is the problem you're having at the moment? What's really helpful is that if you've not sold before, that is getting you into a non-sales, open discussion aimed around the problem that you actually solve. So you've automatically got the right people in front of you. You can then just have a lovely chat with them. And then on the back of that, you can make an offer. So it doesn't feel like a sales thing at all, but you will learn so much. So that would be where to start if you've never sold again.
That's so smart.
That's great, Victoria. We're going to have to wrap up the podcast part of the show. Hopefully Victoria's okay to continue the discussion for about 10-15 minutes, which we call bonus content, which you can find, which you can watch the whole interview on the WP-Tonic YouTube channel. We have a lot of extra content on there. You definitely want to join that. Also, I want to talk about another, before we wrap it up, I want to talk about another great sponsor, that's Peach Bay. If you're looking to set up a quick payment gateway for a client, you really want to look at Peachway. It's in about 5 minutes, you can have a really great professional shopping cart up and running with PeachPay. It works with WooCommerce, but it takes all the heavy lifting out of your hands and for your clients. You'll find the link in the show notes. I highly recommend that you look at PeachPay. So Victoria, what's the best way for people to find out more about you and your words of wisdom?
They should, of course, come and wink at me on LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. LinkedIn is my friend. So come and find me on LinkedIn. Come and wave at me. I'm sure we can drop the link in the comments. You can, of course, go and have a look on the website as well. But I don't have a chat bot, I'm afraid. So if you want to chat to me, come on LinkedIn. And you know what? Drop me a message because I'm a bit chatty.
Yeah, you're friendly. Stephen, what's the best way to find out more about you and what you're up to, Stephen?
Yeah, head over to zipfish.io, run a speed test, see how much faster your website can be.
Yeah. We're going to wrap up the podcast, but also do two things which will really support the show, folks. If you can go over to iTunes podcast player, whatever they've renamed it. They seem to be renaming their podcast platform every 3 days, literally. Go over and leave us a review. It really does help the show. And secondly, join our Facebook group. It's the WP-Tonic Mastermind. All the panel from our roundtable show, including Stephen. We've got any questions about WordPress and business or WordPress in general. Like I say, all the panel are admin. They will help you, and it's just a great place to have a conversation about WordPress business, the whole area. So please join that. We'll be back next week with another great guest like Victoria. We'll see you soon. And please remember, go over to the YouTube channel and watch the bonus content of this interview. We'll see you soon, folks. Bye. So, Victoria, I think sales is a bit like dating, and I've started dating a bit in my 50s, which is a bit interesting. And I think like you meet somebody, you like their profile online, and you meet them and they look nothing like their profile. Well, they can say whatever they like to me, but I just don't fancy them. So whatever they say to me ain't going to work. Or if they do in some way match their profile pictures in some way, and they're sitting there and they're on their phone texting or on social media, and they don't seem to have any interest in me, well, it's not probably going to go too well, the date, really. But is selling a bit like dating, really, Victoria?
Yeah, I mean, you're wanting that person to fall in love. Like, not necessarily with you, but like with your product, I mean, if you're delivering a service, it might be you'd like them to fall in love with you, or at least the result that you can deliver for them. So there's absolutely a little bit with that. I think equally, like sort of a romantic relationship, you do need to work through some of the steps as well, because otherwise you'd be running up with strangers in the street and asking them to marry you, which is just a bit too much, really. Because I think that
it's never worked for me, Victoria.
I thought you were going to say, well, actually, this one time. I mean, you just never know. But it is that whole thing. It's like, when you think about in this day and age, I think especially when you were doing online marketing, and we've got that going on, a lot of the buying process that people go through is online. They're going to probably identify they've got a problem, and they're going to go to Google, and they're going to try and find a solution, and they're going to end up on your website, and they're going to start to find out a bit more about you. So they're going to find out, what the products or service offers. They're going to find out the price. They're going to find out all this sort of stuff. They're going to look at some case studies. This looks great. The next part of the equation is normally when they evaluate. So they see, okay, it's a great solution, but is it the right solution for me personally? And this is where quite often that's when the conversation with yourself takes place. That's when the discovery call happens or something like that, because you know what, they found out everything else on the website. So the interesting thing is that actually, that whole thing about building in the relationship, about falling in love, it's a very defined point where, at this point, people are actually starting to engage with us. And actually, it's a surprisingly long way through that process quite often, because generally after evaluating and having that sort of conversation, trying it on for size, they'll make the decision to buy, to not buy, to put it off for the moment, to buy from a competitor. And I think this is one of the things where, great marketing funnels can bring people to that point of evaluation on its own. But sometimes that's the bit that's more complex.
Yeah, I'll give you, I'm looking to buy a new car, Victoria. So I've done my online research, and I think this is the point that you were making was so true, is that I think people are further along the sales process than a few years ago, because they got all this information at their fingertips on their smartphone, there's no shortage of information, Victoria. So they're normally, unless they're totally confused, which a lot of people, when they come to my website, they're literally so confused by all the options. They're just looking for somebody who can just say, you should use this. But most of the time, people are further on the sales process. So I've been looking to buy a car. So I've got a short list, and then I've had the blessed experience of going to a car dealership, Victoria, and I've been aghast at the amount of salespeople that know, and I'm sorry to use the French, Victoria, know fuck all about the actual product that they are selling. I mean, I know more about the car than they know. Is this very common? And I think if you want a career in sales, if you're like that, you might as well get a gun and shoot yourself.
Well, this is the irony is I don't think anyone ever starts off wanting to be that kind of salesperson. But sometimes what happens is businesses, I think especially when you're an employed salesperson, businesses might push you in a given direction, or you might be kind of almost like molded to go a certain way. And I think because of money in that situation, sometimes people can start to lose their way a little bit. I think that's a really interesting analogy, or not analogy, like sort of statement there, right, about car selling as well, because I think with all software and technology and these more complex things, on the one hand, you don't want to get so, down into the detail that you're like, yeah, and this button here, well, it took our engineers 5 years to design it. And it's so amazing because on the back of it, it does this and that. And your prospect's just like, I really couldn't care less. Like, why would I care? But then you've got the other challenge, which is not having enough knowledge, where it's like, well, it's a great car, it goes really fast. You'd like that, wouldn't you? So I think it's that whole thing about, it's about nuance, but it's also about the person in front of you, because there will be some people who literally want to know, all the I's and T's, they want to know all the tech detail. There's some people who literally just want to know how fast does it get 70 miles an hour. Sorry, kilometers, it's kilometers, isn't it? How fast, how quickly can it do that? 0.63 seconds or whatever, and kind of have it in red. They're their only questions. So that part of the skill in selling software, technology, and all this kind of stuff is being able to judge, and to be able to judge with the person that you're working with, what does this person need for them to make the right decision for them, and be allowing yourself to be a little bit led, because otherwise you will end up too far one side or the other, and that person will just walk away disappointed and fairly frustrated.
I think that was a fantastic insight, because I've done it myself. Before I throw it over, because we've probably got another 5 minutes, because I don't want to take up too much of your time. Another thing is, I used to rabbit. I used to be fearful of silence, and to feel the silence of a sales call, especially when it comes to closing the deal. You're giving them a price and they've gone silent, and I've just felt the need to jump in, to fill the void. you know, I think you really got to work on that. Would you agree on that?
Yeah, I think people do get scared about silence, and I think, and there's all this sales stuff. Well, whoever speaks first loses the sale, and it's like, it's like all this kind of stuff, and whatever. I'm not a big fan on some of that stuff, because if it feels uncomfortable to you, then don't do it. I'm all about, every single one of us can sell. It's just about unlocking what's going to work for us. If it makes you feel uncomfortable, all you need to do instead is work out what will work for you and what you will feel comfortable with. And one of the things I was working with a team on recently had a seller who felt like that as part of that. And so all we did was we reframed how they presented the price. So instead of ending on, so that'll be, £9,999, which is like what they've been doing previously, we changed that up. So instead we said, we can get you on board for that. It's £9,999. We can actually ensure that you've got that implemented by the end of the month. How does that sound? Now, the two things about that are, one is it means that we don't end on the price. We end on an assumption that they're going to say yes, and we're going to have it in for the end of the month for them, which is a lovely way of programming here. The other thing is, that's quite a nice, gentle statement at the end. How does that sound? Or, what do you think? Something like that, nice and gentle, because what that actually allows your prospect to do is you are instructing them to respond. So what they now need to do is answer that question. Now, that's really helpful for you, because now you haven't got dead air. But the other thing is, you actually hear what they think. And once you hear what they think, you can handle it. Dead silence, you just start thinking about it in your head. Oh, they're going to say no, they think it's too much money, they think I'm an idiot, they don't understand the product. Oh my goodness, they're going to go with the competitor. I mean, all this stuff is just going round and round and round in your head. So this just takes all of that away, because they'll actually tell you what they think once you've done that.
One more question, and over to you, Steve, and then we'll wrap it up.
Oh, that's sorry, I thought you were going to ask one more, and then I was going to be able to ask one more, but I guess this is my one more. So, question that's been...
Well, you can ask two. I'll leave it to Victoria's judgment.
No, this question has been in my head since like 5 minutes in. When you're trying to sell something and it's just not working out, and it feels like you've exhausted all your different avenues, is there a point where you're just like, this product is wrong? Like, in all the times that you've helped companies figure out sales processes and how they sell stuff, like, have you ever gotten to the point where, like, you know what, you are selling the wrong thing? Like, this doesn't, maybe you needed this, but there's nobody else in this world that needs this? Or is that just never actually the case, and it's just unlocking that door to figure out how to sell it?
Okay, so there's two things. So yes and no. That's not a great answer. Let me elaborate. So yes, we've got, and certainly there's a couple of companies I've got to where, like, early stage generally, where, having had some of the kind of feedback conversations, it became very evident that the proposition altogether just didn't work. And what that really came down to, so it would have been very easy at that point to say, look, this product there's just not a need for this product. There just isn't. The key to unlocking that was in those conversations saying, well, why? I mean, we felt this answered this problem, does it not? And actually listening to what people said. And, what people said was, well, I mean, it does. It's better than what we've got, but it's not enough better than what we've got to go to all of the hassle to implement it. Right. Okay. So there's two things there. It's not enough better and hassle to implement it. Right. There's now two things we can start to dig on. Okay. So tell me, what would make it better? So in that scenario, what we actually did was we put like an extra button in effect. We put an extra bit of functionality in there to actually answer that. So it wasn't just better. It was significantly better. And the second thing that we did about was we actually changed the proposition. So we got to the point where with what we were actually offering, we really streamlined and simplified how they could implement it. And we started to offer a little add-on service to say, well, look, we'll just do it for you. You don't need to worry about it. We'll just do it for you. And that really started to change everything. So I think that's an example where the product sort of had to change. Now, we could have still sold it. We could have sold it without doing that. But in order to do that, we were going to have to crash the price. We were going to have to make real compromise around what we were offering in order to make the gap on that value more significant against the price. And of course, we didn't want to do that because the price was the price for, you know, our long-term plans for that platform. So that's a bit of a funny question, but I think if you're having a problem selling your product, and I think especially if it's a brand new product, like, you've really got to go back to brass tacks. You've got to go and talk to your audience, and you've got to have this really honest conversation with them and say, you know, almost without the product in your mind, say, look, what are your big problems at the moment? You know, and just firstly validate that they actually have the problem that you're trying to solve. And then secondly, really ask them, okay, so what have you tried to do to solve that problem? Or how do you currently solve that problem? You know, what's your current solution? What would it take to change that? Okay, well, we thought we'd come up with a solution. Could you give me a little bit of help with that, a little bit of feedback? So it's almost kind of really, really being a little bit humble almost, and going back to your audience and just having those conversations. And you know what's interesting? I've done that with a couple of businesses. And what's fascinating is it's quite often those people who ultimately become your early adopters, because they feel they've invested in you and they've invested in that product, and they're now part of the journey. So yeah, that would probably be how I've approached that in the past. I don't think there's any such thing as a completely pointless product. I think maybe you just haven't quite, you know, it needs a tweak, or maybe the audience needs to change. Bit of work.
Brilliant. I love it.
Right, Victoria, you have to come back. Hopefully you agree to come back on the show. I've really enjoyed the interview. I think we've covered some great territory. Your insights have been fantastic. And I've enjoyed the interview, and hopefully you felt the same when you agreed to come back at some stage. We're going to wrap it up now, listeners and viewers. We'll be back next week with another fantastic guest like Victoria. We'll see you soon. Bye.